Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're well, and thank you very much for joining us. This is part two of our um, session looking at voluntary community, faith, and social enterprises, and it's part of it comes out of a working group that was set up following last year's conference, where there were some direct and quite valid challenges. Um, that were directed at the task force and a number of organisations saying um, the voluntary sector is struggling to win work. And so we've set up a task force, and that's been running now for 6 months. And we're in the process of writing a document that will be ready sometime before Christmas, and it's a set of guidance really for three groups of people: the buyers, the businesses that might employ social enterprises or the sector, but also the VCFSE themselves. And so we had a session this morning. It was very much looking at the barriers and the challenges. Some really interesting challenges came up, which I'll go through in the next slide in just a moment. Don't show the slide yet, though, Chris. And then what we're going to really talk about today are some of the solutions. So the question we're asking ourselves, how do we partner with VCFSEs to unlock more social value? And that's really what we want to explore today, is how are we going to partner? How do we make it easier? And I think it's quite clear that I don't think there's anyone who says that the sector are probably best placed to understand communities. They're best placed to deliver social value or impact really, really locally. But there are challenges, and the question, how do we unlock that particular sort of opportunity? So that's the kind of background to this session. I'm delighted to say we've got four amazing speakers who each represent different parts of this puzzle, if you like. So we've got Katrina Browning, who is the head of procurement at Babergh and Mid Suffolk District Council, and was previously at Suffolk County Council, and has lots of experience of working in the sector, and she plainly brings the buyer perspective. We have Sue Pickerill, who's head of social value at the Wates Group, and is going to talk about how Wates Group engages with the sector. We have Tiia Sammallahti, who is actually Tiia is very much looking at how to match and broker relationships between both the public sector, private sector, and the third sector, and she's helped me bring this together, this section. Then we've got Richard, who's actually representing the sector itself, and so Richard's the co-founder of a group called SportInspired. So if you go to the next slide, please, Chris. When we've been sort of going through this, and the next slide, please. When we've been going through this, we've identified a series of challenges, and I'm not going to go through all this, and this will come out in the document, but I'll just let you, I'll pick up some of these that came up previously in the discussions that we had just earlier this morning. Right at the top of this, I think the first three we'll sort of tackle: market competition versus purpose-driven procurement. So there's something here about the type of procurement process that's used in engaging with voluntary organisations. And we had Julian Blake from Stone King this morning, a lawyer, saying that to get the most out of the sector, it's inappropriate to use a kind of market competition mechanism. We need to think about what he calls collaborative pathways, and indeed within the Procurement Act, the light touch pathways. And he explained that that's a better way of doing things. It'd be interesting to hear Katrina talk about that in particular. I think then this other key issue of inherent value versus additional social value. Now, when we go about market-based competition, what you need to do and you have to do is level the playing field. And with the Social Value Act, what's very clear is it talks about additionality. It talks about social value being outside of the core contract. So when you're comparing one bidder to the next bidder, you are ignoring the core contract. You're only, from a social value perspective, I should say, you're ignoring the core contract and you're only comparing the additional social value. And that I think it's a real issue for social enterprises, and the sector will come to that, and Tiia will no doubt talk a little about that, and we'll have some questioning around that. And the other thing I think we've got is this whole issue around capacity and resources, which I think is very important. And the question is, how do we develop a set of guidance to make it as easy as possible for the sector to engage, so they can learn and they don't struggle with trying to win work and compete against organisations that have a lot of resource. There's a couple of other things we'll pick up in the questions around partnerships and sort of how we engage with the sector first. But I think what we'll do, we'll kick off with Tiia's presentation first. Next slide, please. And Tiia's just going to set the scene for us, and then we'll dive into Katrina. Then we're going to have Sue, and then finally Richard. And then we'll have some questions. Tiia, over to you.
Okay, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And it has been really a big pleasure to be part of Social Value Task Force's VCFSE working group. And thanks, Guy, for hosting. Big thanks for all the members of the group. And some of them are here today speaking with me. Yeah, we at whatimpact have been very proud to bring a strong set of VCFSEs to the table. So next slide, please. So for too long, VCFSEs have not had a strong enough voice in public sector procurement and related social value conversations. That is now changing, and VCFSEs are finally in the spotlight, though challenges remain. Government initiatives from Social Value Act to procurement policy notes and national procurement policy statements aim to give VCFSEs a greater role in public contracts. That's fantastic, but we must also think of the 95% of the VCFSEs who don't seek direct contracts. They act as suppliers to tier 1, 2, 3 contractors and operate as social value delivery partners through donations and volunteering. Public sector buyers now recognize that enabling these local connections need coordination. After years of undelivered social value by suppliers, facilitation methods now range from personalized support to Excel sheets to listing sites and brokerage systems. Tender evaluations increasingly reward clear, locally relevant social value plans with named VCFSE partners and collaboration models. Next slide, please. This growing focus on connecting suppliers with local VCFSEs has massive potential for society. Every NPPS outcome can be achieved with VCFSE support, directly or indirectly. Companies need VCFSEs to train their teams, deliver services that promote diverse employment, reduce waste and pollution, and keep their staff healthy and motivated. VCFSEs also run local intervention that builds community strength, innovation, culture, health, inclusion, and safety. Inviting these organizations to be social value delivery partners simply makes sense. Next slide. When public sector buyers use their purchasing power to create add-on social value through supplier VCFSE partnerships, they ensure crucial services, support, and interventions available for communities, but also for their own staff and other direct stakeholders. But how these partnerships are facilitated really matters. Without effective coordination and strategic intent, opportunities scatter and impact is weak. Next slide, please. For social value to be sustainable, suppliers need freedom to design approaches that fit their own capabilities, contract length, and size. We see the most impact-driven partnerships between government suppliers and VCFSEs when suppliers are not restricted to shortlist and instant donation requests. For smaller contracts, quick donation and voluntary matches can really work. But for larger, longer-term contracts, partnerships should create new, scalable projects that make measurable differences. Suppliers managing dozens or even hundreds of contracts across the country cannot keep responding to ad hoc small requests in each location. Social value will only become embedded in supplier operations when they are allowed to be strategic and ambitious. Social value activities should also be guided by area-specific deprivation data, not just by individual resource requests by a few FSEs. That said, we must also empower VCFSEs to be more active partners. co-creating programs and local interventions with suppliers and councils. We need a level playing field for both small and large, new and established local and nationwide VCFSEs to access supplier partnerships. Public sector procurement alone cannot solve all societal challenges. The focus should be on areas where add-on contract-specific partnership can really make the biggest difference. True impact isn't measured by donated pounds or volunteering hours. It's measured by proven benefits to people. Inputs and outputs can sound very impressive, but they don't prove change. Making social value simple is an appealing slogan used by many, but big impact often requires effort, co-creation, long-term planning, and coordination. When solving complex challenges, oversimplifying is not the answer. Next slide, please. However, good technology and high-quality data can make social value easier and more efficient. At whatimpact, we are making strategic social value achievable for suppliers of all sizes and accessible for every VCFSE, from small community group to nationwide service providers. We offer public sector hyperlocal marketplace that connects VCFSEs and suppliers on one unified platform with full partnership management system. Looking ahead, we are thrilled to be launching the first nationwide VCFSE summit in the first quarter of 2026. Our goal is to strengthen the VCFSE role in the public sector procurement and social value, and to empower VCFSEs in resource raising and co-creation with private sector partners. If your organization would like to learn more about this full-day online event being now planned and explore sponsorship or collaboration opportunities, please reach out to me at tia@whatimpact.com. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Tiia. And I'm sure you'll drop your email into the chat so people can reach out to you. And I would love to hear a bit more. Just tell me a little bit about this summit. It's the first I've heard of it. So just tell us a little bit more. What's your plan with the summit?
So it's a full-day online summit. It is kind of our self-made thing, but we are building this kind of inspirational 5-theme related day, free for all the VCFSEs across the country. We want to have 1,000 participants at least. Okay. And of course, companies, public sector bodies are welcome, but all the content is empowering VCFSEs to understand more their chances in public sector procurement and social value, and then also kind of getting into the creative aspects of their work, innovation and so forth through very inspirational speakers. I have very nice high-level speakers already confirmed, but we welcome more.
Excellent. Is there a date, by the way, yet, or is it
not
still...
yet? It might be early March.
Early March, okay. So you'll let us know. Fantastic, good. Okay, thanks very much. We'll come back to you with some questions. So now I'd like to invite Katrina to give us a view from the public sector. And at this point, Katrina's going to share her screen because we missed dropping her slide in. So Katrina, do you want to share your screen now, and hopefully the technology will work. But while we're doing that, what you've just heard from Tiia is a real champion for the sector. And what we'll do, we'll pick up a conversation later about how we find out how technology can help broker those relationships, those tools, and be good to hear about that success. But in the meantime, let's hear from Katrina, who's going to talk us through from public sector perspective. Katrina, over to you.
Thank you, Guy. And wow, Tiia, I'm not sure how you really follow that. Tia's just outlined obviously a lot of the complexities regarding the sector. And for those of you that joined the session regarding the VCFSE earlier today, when we were looking at the challenges, you'd have seen a lot of the challenges outlined throughout that session. And one of the things that continuously came up was about the complexity of the sector. So in terms of working together, sort of overcoming some of the challenges that you need to do that successfully. I've been working with the sector for the majority of my professional life, working in procurement, and I've been working in public sector procurement for about 30 years now, the majority of which being in local government. And during that time, the constant barrier which we've seen working with the VCFSE is about the complexity of the relationship. And now that we're looking at social value, it's inherent as part of that work. So my very strange slide in front of you today here really starts to try and outline that and explain the theory behind what I'm saying here. So when we're working with businesses, in the main, it's quite clear cut between what they're delivering and the social value offer that they have. So here on the left-hand side of the slide, you've got the blue arrow, an offer from a business in terms of their social value offer, looking at three main themes from the Act. Obviously, if you're using the social value model, you'd have more themes than that. But quite clear cut the difference between the two. When we start working with the VCFSE, not only is the VCFSE as a sector absolutely huge and extremely diverse, so just as when we look at businesses, we've got the global international businesses right down to the micro businesses and SMEs. We have exactly the same scenarios with the VCFSE sector as well. So when people talk about it as a sector, it is so diverse and dynamic as a sector. When you look at your local VCFSE markets, they're constantly changing. Very often you'll have VCFSE which are centred around individuals. And if that individual moves on or isn't part of that organisation anymore, the organisation will often look quite different because it's quite small and it's swift of foot to be able to do that. So unless you know your market and you're on top of that and you can see how it's shifting and changing, you'll miss opportunities. But you'll also miss potential risks where potentially there was an organisation delivering very well and now they're doing something quite different. So our diversity of the sector is its strength, but it also creates one of those challenges in terms of understanding and keeping on top of the changes on a constant basis. When we talk to the sector and we look at their social value, because social value is inherent to what they do, and we've talked a lot in the conference so far this week regarding language, and there's constantly been comments made about people been doing social value for years, but they probably haven't used that label. When we talk to VCFSEs, they are doing social value, but they're probably focusing more on the social impact and looking at that rather than actually the social value delivery. But when they bid competitively for grants or for contracts, they will look at the social value offer that they're able to deliver alongside that. So the slide here, you can see the 4 arrows down the page, just to represent the diverse range of VCFSEs and sizes and shapes that they are. And at the bottom there, you've got a larger organisation, and there's 3 different funding streams there represented, each with a social value offer. Each of those social value offers look a little bit different because it depends what they're delivering, what they're offering. And you can see in that social impact, those darker yellow arrows there, they represent that social impact that's part of that funding stream. So either as the grant fund or as the contract, that is what they are contracted or funded to deliver. But in effect, the VCFSE don't just deliver in terms of their social value, the coloured blobs, which is what their defined offer is, the social impact, within the scope of that funding in terms of the darker yellow arrows. But that whole area, the whole pink area, the whole yellow area, that is what they're doing, that's what they're delivering. And when VCFSE bid, what very often VCFSE don't recognise and don't articulate in their bid is that actually inherently the fact they get funding from that funding stream means that it helps them to exist and it helps them to deliver the whole social impact that they're achieving there. And it's that critical factor that I find is the biggest challenge that we have, working with the VCFSE sector, helping them to articulate that and to ensure that it's easy for them to articulate their social value offer and their impact that they're able to offer. And it's the language and it's that principle that really is a sticking point. So my advice, my top tip for other fellow buyers out there, and also for businesses working with the sector, is to support the sector to understand that principle and to help looking at the whole inherent social value that they offer over and above that particular funding stream. because when you're able to do that and the sector's able to easily respond and to find the social value that they offer, their social offer and their social value scoring regarding a competitive bid, they're going to be exceptional. But it's about being able to understand that and articulate that. One of the other things that was said in the challenges webinar earlier today was from Tara Spence from Homestart Suffolk, when she talked about guidance and information out there for the BCC sector. Now, with such a vibrant market, it's constantly changing. So any advice and guidance out there needs to be perpetual. It needs to be a programme that's repeated and available to the sector on an ongoing basis. Because staff change and move on, and you will lose the messages out there if you don't keep pressing the repeat button and working with the sector to make sure you're responding to how it's moving forward and keeping those guidance and tools out there. And the principle was made this morning to say that guidance isn't readily available or affordable for the VCFSE. So my top tip to other buyers out there is to understand the local sector. And to work with the sector to ensure that there is training and guidance, effectively available to them. So in the past, work that I've done with the sectors include one-to-one workshops, small group workshops, webinars, podcasts for the local infrastructure group, and keeping the messages keep dripping through. What we've found when we've done workshops regarding social value is that there's quite a broad range of views within the room, depending on the size of the voluntary community sectors. So it's some understanding of the market and segmenting potentially the market. So you have sort of similar sized organisations together would probably be helpful and help to deliver that training most effectively with best use of everybody's time. My top tip for the VCFC sector is to understand that principle and to acknowledge the fact that what you're doing and continue to do delivers social value, and being able to articulate that alongside any bids that you put forward. But it's also to know your ask. So we've talked a lot today about businesses and businesses offering social value, but very often that offer of social value, if that blue arrow on the left hand side of the screen is offered to the VCFC sector. If the VCFC sector is receptive to that, we've talked a lot about partnerships and how you achieve that partnership today. If the VCFC sector is receptive to that offer and knows what their ask is and what they would want from a partnership, that partnership is going to be so much more successful and start achieving outcomes so much quicker. So know your ask and deliver on your offer. In the challenges this morning webinar, there was conversations about glossy social value promises and are things actually being delivered. What the VCFC sector are able to do is articulate their delivery, their social impact, and evidence well that they are actually absolutely achieving social value. So that's a real strength that they're able to bring to the table when they put forward a bid. So understand that and know that and deliver on what you're able to, and therefore if buyers keep it simple and are listening and looking at their markets, which is completely in keeping with the national guidance now and the new Procurement Act and our national procurement policy statement, to keep things simple and be receptive to working with those smaller markets in the VCFSE, then we should have a good platform that supports the market to put forward their offer in the most cost-effective and efficient way, hopefully achieving results.
Excellent. Thank you, Katrina. There's something you mentioned. I'm going to pick up a whole series of questions later around types of procurement. If you stop sharing your slide now, then we'll be able to carry on with the... Yeah, that's right. Don't bring up the slides again, Chris. Thanks. Yeah, no, I'd be interested. We'll have the discussion about the types of procurement. I was really interested in your point, and it kind of the penny drops, so to speak, when you said perpetual guidance. I mean, we're all in danger. I mean, I've been doing now social value since 2014, 2015, and you think, well, once you've said it once or twice or three times, you don't need to keep saying it again, because surely everyone knows. But the point you make is a really valid point, which is we need to recognise there are new charities, new third sector organisers coming into existing sort of perhaps even every day of the week, but certainly every week or two. And so this notion of perpetual guidance is important by the sounds of it. Is that correct, Katrina?
Absolutely. When you know your local market, you can almost see the messages sort of gradually dwindling, you know, as new faces come through and you see the changes. You've got to keep the messages going, and alongside that, obviously the conversation and listening to what the sector needs to support them.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. We must pick that up. Good. Okay, so now we're going to move to a different type of partnership. So we've spoken about partnership via director engagement with the public sector, direct award, if you like, whether it's grants or through competition. We'll come back to that. But now we're going to explore how organisations, perhaps of any size, we'll listen to Sue, can actually partner with the third sector, and what a good partnership looks like and why. Sue, over to you.
Thanks, Guy. Could you move slides, please, Chris? Thank you. So just for those of you that don't know, Wates is a family-owned development, construction and property maintenance company. We've been established over 125 years and employ around 6,000 people working across the UK. We're also a founding member of the Bisocial Corporate Challenge with Social Enterprise UK, and have been advocating for and trading with social enterprises for almost a decade now. Thanks, Chris. Next slide, please. So Guy asked me to think about why partner with VCFSEs. And so there are a number of reasons why I would suggest to any corporates that are listening on this that they may want to be doing this or to increase their activity. So it's a really dynamic sector. There are over 130,000 social enterprises in the UK. So 1 in every 42 businesses is a social enterprise. That's in addition to the voluntary and community organisations there as well. A third of social enterprises are under 3 years old. So they bring a real innovation and agility to complement established supply chains. And it's also a really growing sector. So 65% of social enterprises increased their turnover in the past year. We also recognise that they're really inclusive employers and provide more opportunities for people facing barriers. So for every £100,000 invested with a social enterprise, they create 1 job, which outperforms commercial businesses in terms of providing employment. And they're also more likely to employ people who are furthest from the workforce, so such as people with disabilities, people with lived experience of homelessness, or people with criminal records. They tend to be more representative as well, such as being more likely to have leadership that's female or ethnically diverse. And they tend to be resilient, innovative, flexible and diverse, all attributes that are really encouraged as part of that public sector bidding aligned to the social value model, PPN 002, around kickstarting economic growth. And so by engaging with VCFSEs, we can drive impact by partnering and investing in supply chain and partners that are really investing into their own purpose. Next slide, please, Chris. So we recognise that many VCFSEs are also SMEs, so tend to be smaller organisations that are driven to solve societal challenges, but are not experts in everything and tend to be juggling all sorts of different roles that they're not experts in, and they may not have had much training in before they've found themselves leading HR and pricing and procurement and all the other things that they need to do when leading a business. So we've found that professional volunteering is a great way to be able to support and upskill and really valuable way of engaging and partnering. We also see, as Katrina's mentioned, sort of really changing legislative landscape from the Procurement Act, the NPPS and the Social Value Model, PPN 002. We've seen that there's much more encouragement now to be supporting, working with organisations and using contractual social value to deliver impact in areas of priority. I think there's also a risk that sometimes that focus can become too narrow, so it reduces that broader ambition and purpose, and there's maybe something we can discuss there. I think there's always a tension between, on the one hand, a procurement drive for efficiency and quality through building fewer, larger partnerships, and on the other hand, a growing localism agenda that strives to give greater support to SMEs and VCFSEs in a particular locality. I'm not sure that that there's an answer to that, but just that those need to be held in tension. I think there's definitely room for both. And I think one of the simplest ways to support social enterprises and VCFSE sector is through trading with them. However, there are additional ways I think corporates can build capacity. And I just want to touch on a case study about a program that we've set up called Assets that we developed with the Impact Hub. So next slide, please. The Assets program came out of our strategy. I've been the Wates strategy in social value for the past 5 years. It's had a focus on supporting people who face barriers to work and inspiring and educating young people, and also spending with social enterprises. We've actually spent over £40 million with social enterprises during this period back to 2020. But I wanted to do something to go beyond spend and look at that capacity building opportunity within the social enterprise sector. So just wanted to touch on this case study. Next slide, please, Chris. So we established, working alongside the Impact Hub back in 2020, and have delivered a multi-month programme annually since then. So we've run 5 programmes, and that's been a 6 to 7 month programme. We've sort of varied the time year to year, sort of based on feedback. And the programme provides a needs analysis and mentoring from colleagues at Wates. And also we've partnered with our key partner in the Travis Perkins Group, one of our key suppliers. And this year also Resonance, who are a social impact company, and an impact investor. So we've had mentors coming from those organisations that we've put in small groups alongside social enterprises to really look at what support they need, and how those mentors might be able to provide some insights, be a sounding board. And then we've also delivered workshops in topics from digital marketing to understanding procurement, building leadership resilience, and some peer sessions. So it's sort of a multi-element programme. And looking at the feedback from last year, all 5 social enterprises on the programme gained new contracts through the programme and expanded their teams as well. 60% were able to secure financial resource, 60% increased their turnover, 69% increased their clarity around impact measurement and data collection, 53% improved their understanding of growth and scaling options for their business. And they collectively attributed up to 50% of their business growth to the Assets programme. So I think it's just an example of how we can do things, simple things as a corporate by just switching out something and trading, but also thinking a bit differently about how you can use the professional skills that you have within your organisation to support VCFSEs to develop their capacity. Thanks, Guy.
That's great, Sue. I'm really fascinated by that program that you have, and presumably you've focused on these are all in some way or other construction or relate. They can be in your supply chain. Is that right? They're not just random organizations. They can actually add value to your supply chain.
Yeah, that's right. So they've all had some element of being on the fringe of trading with the construction sector in some way, shape or form.
Right.
And this year, actually, we've focused the programme more with a more explicit definition. So they're all focused around low carbon heating. Previously, they've been more sort of varied, but this year we've had that specific focus. So there's more alignment between the social enterprises this year as well. Okay,
and just one last question before I bring you in, Richard. These are social enterprises as opposed to voluntary, faith or
they are
groups.
specifically for this programme.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so we do engage
and
with,
generally speaking.
Yeah, we do engage with the voluntary and community, but this particular programme has been focused on social enterprise. Yes.
Okay, we'll pick that up separately. Good. Okay, thanks very much. Good. Okay, and now finally we're at the top of the food chain. Is that what we call it, Richard? Or I'm not quite sure where you feel you might be, but let's start at the top of the food chain. We're going to hear from Richard now, who is a small charity, and will give us his perspective of what we've heard, and also his perspective generally of just being out there trying to win work with both local authorities and then also businesses. Richard, floor is yours, my friend.
Thanks. I'm pretty sure we're the bottom of the food chain, right? Not the top. But
I didn't. There's no way I was going to say that. Sorry. And incidentally, anyone who's got Q&A questions, please drop them into the chat. I've only got 3 questions so far. Please drop it in, Richard. Carry on.
Okay, great. So, yeah, we're a small, on the verge of, I guess, being medium-sized charity. We turn over about £1 million a year. Our goal is to help all kids to enjoy being active at the younger age, and then once they become teenagers, to help build and grow their employability skills and their confidence as leaders, and arming them with both the love of sport and the confidence of leadership to help them be the best they can and make them the best of their lives. And like any charity, obviously our passion is in making the world a better place. And the limit to that is how effective we are with the money we've got and how much money we can get. So public tendering is a huge topic, huge area for us. But there is a central key problem. In 17 years of doing what I do as the founder and CEO of this charity, I can count on one hand how many public tenders I've gone for, we've gone for. And the bottom line is, and without wishing to sound over dramatic, public tendering lands for me a bit like the Wild West. And what I mean by that is that it feels like going for public tendering is often akin to being taking a reckless gamble. And with real precious charity resources, simply put, it's just seen as too risky. And key reasons for that is often our capacity is often very limited. So our time and our we've got a lot of things to do in a short space of time, and the capacity that is just kind of there for future projects and for being creative, and the sort of thing that a lot of larger businesses built in as standard is something that simply doesn't really exist for us. Then when it comes to actually taking on the bidding processes, they land as being very confusing, very hard to navigate. There's a very significant public tender out right now. It feels like an exceptional fit for us. I've been on the portal that's used several times. Every time I go on, I get lost. I take 3 hours to do something that should take me 5 minutes. And that builds up in your mind as going, there's another reason why this isn't going to work. Then when you get into you get past the actual how to fill in the form and how to send off the tender, the concerns you have that actually this is probably going to get won by one of the bigger names out there. We don't have a relationship with the people that are making the decisions. So again, is it really worth it? Are we actually going after something that makes sense? So we go out there, we want to go for tenders, but trying to find stuff that fits us well is difficult, and that it feels like ultimately the odds are stacked firmly against us. But I'm a believer in solutions, not problems. And so if I knew that there was going to be, real simple language that was used by the public sector in talking about what's needed and what we need to do. There is feedback, constructive feedback when my application doesn't succeed. Knowing if we think we're a good fit, well, why were we unsuccessful? Even if that's 5 minutes, that would be massively appreciated. And then in terms of the tier 1 providers, how can they encourage and support more partnerships with us? So in short, if the sector can be proactive at helping build the confidence of organisations like me to believe that going forward and taking on public tenders is worth it, we're going to go after more. There's going to be higher quality of potential SME VCFSEs providers that are there, and ultimately better choice and better results.
Great. Thanks, Richard, for that. Okay, let's get you all back into the room. In fact, you can drop the slide, actually, Chris. Let's just get us all all our wonderful mugshots up there, which is great. Okay, fantastic. So, I mean, Richard, what was really interesting about that is, and it's sort of slightly worried me, and I'll go directly to Katrina with this question, but it'd be good to hear from you first, is that I think you said something like, quite frankly, it's too risky and too complex and we just don't bother. That's kind of summarizing what you think about public sector. Katrina, how do you respond?
Well, that might be the case. It's depends on what's there. When we talk about tenders, it's not just tenders, it's tenders, quotes, it's competitive grants, and there's a very broad range there, and a very big broad range of value as well. And there's something completely different between bidding for a one-off annual community grant, or even a longer-term 3-year grant, or a service that's going to be delivered, or an impact that needs to be responded to locally, that's maybe worth 50 or 100k, to look at how you contribute to something that's worth multi-million pounds. The spectrum of that is just so phenomenally different. So it really does depend on the size of the organisation, what they're interested in, and making sure they know where to access those opportunities, because sometimes when you're looking at those lower value opportunities, they won't necessarily be advertised in quite the same way, because they may well be done as closed quotations, for example, or closed grant processes, which comes down to knowing your local markets and that market engagement to know how to communicate and make sure the messages are there in the right forum, with the potential VCFSE that could respond.
And so, Katrina, do you go? I'm just interested in the type of contract and the type of award. So somehow we need to think about how we engage the sector, right? And that could be through a competition, it could be through a grant, it could be through direct, whatever it might be. Do you craft those according to what you're trying to sort of do with the money, or is it everything is just going through the procurement process? What's that? How do you decide? And do you think public sector can do it better or more incisively?
How we go to market would completely be reflected in the process used, how you do your market engagement to begin with, what documentation you use, the structure of your valuation criteria, making sure you're proportionate. All of the procurement legislation has always talked about proportionality. So you don't use an over complex process for something that needs to be simple. So in terms of practice, what people are doing, it varies enormously. And the comment that Richard said about the Wild West, I get that. I see procurement practice from colleagues, and sometimes when I look at their tender documentation, 30 years public sector procurement, and it does my head in. And I look at it and I'm thinking, if I'm finding that complex, what would it be like for someone that doesn't look at these documents on a day-to-day basis? So I completely get that. I think the key message we've got to give to the public sector is to keep it simple and keep it proportionate. And if we're going to really follow the national policy and direction of travel we've been asked to do, which, to be fair, in local government we've been doing for many, many years anyway, we need to really grasp that and make sure that, you know, if we're generally wanting the VCFSE to respond and to engage with us regarding some of these commercial opportunities, that we do it in such a way that is appropriate and receptive for them to be able to respond to, which includes looking at length of time for responses. You know, because it might be far more difficult to actually get approvals and sign-offs from trustees when people are volunteers.
Okay, good. Chris, can you bring up John Dunn's question? I'm going to ask Tiia for this, and then I'd be interested to get both Suzanne and Richard's view on it. So John Dunn has asked, and this cuts to the core of this issue around additionality versus core contract. And I think this is a really important part to sort of tease out. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. As a charity, we struggle to meet some of the social value commitments as additionality being asked by local authorities, ICBs, through the tender process. However, 100% of the work is, by definition, social value. So this speaks about the procurement process. Tiia, what's your advice, your thoughts on this whole issue around additionality versus core contract?
Thank you, John, for this question, because I actually was hoping to have this question from the audience. Yes, so I guess we've been talking about this scenario quite a lot in the VCFSE working group, and our view kind of and what impact we deal with a lot of VCFSEs all the time is that yes, your whole work is social value. But I guess in the tender process, it would be important to separate what you are actually selling as a core service. And I use this as an example always, that if it's like elderly care services, what is the, let's say, council buying from you? And you price and put that as a service, what you're selling. You know, it's a room and nursing and 3 meals a day and so forth. Kind of what are they actually paying for? Then all this lovely care activities, whatever you are providing as social value, you might have volunteers who are taking elderly people out, reading clubs, exercise, whatever you are doing. That's a separate thing, because that's not the sole service, so to speak. That's the added on value. And you can list these things as your added value, social value. And it can be then also that you partner with other VCFSEs who might kind of almost like build a network of additional services, or even if you do elderly care services, you could be then partnering with environmental charities, and your own staff could maybe do some own volunteering days or something, and that's additional value. So this is how I would structure.
Okay, good. And Richard, can I just ask you to, what's your thought about this? I mean, you understand that juxtaposition between the two. What's your, do you just wish it wasn't all about additionality, just about your core? Do you understand the reason why additionality is used in some cases?
Yeah, I think the charity sector does have a little bit of a tendency to believe so passionately in what they're trying to achieve, and that there's almost an expectation that it's up to society to find a way to pay for it. And I think, you know, if you're really going to be successful at finding the funding you need to do what you do, you've really got to go the other way and say, well, you know, who wants to pay for what I'm doing, and therefore be willing, really, as Tiia said, to fit what you do to what people are asking for as best you can. And sometimes that means repackaging. So doing the same thing, but just talking about it in a slightly different way. Sometimes that means actually maybe even deconstructing it, you know. So we'll do employability training, and we'll get kids into sport, but some people don't want to pay for getting kids into sport, but they do want to pay for employability training. So maybe we can just package up that little bit as the opportunity. And then from the other side, I really think that a better intended partnership approach, whereby the funder can say, okay, here's what I wanted to pay for, but I really like this organization, so maybe I can flex a little bit what I'm willing to put down as the key conditions.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you, Chris, bring up the question by Suzanne Dunn? And I'm going to ask Suzanne Pickerill about this as well. So what I'm interested in Sue, is this what makes a good partnership, and also your big business, Wates, is very successful and a family-run construction business. And Suzanne asked, as an SME, how can we make sure that we are offering and providing the best value for our social value pound spend, are partnering with VCFSE through an organisation like Impact Hub a good place to start, or what impact? Yeah, I mean, so that I'm interested in. What's your thought? What's your advice to SMEs?
I think certainly one of the things that I've seen is the SMEs and VCFSEs generally sometimes underestimate their own buying power, and don't recognise that they themselves can contribute to having an impact here. But also recognise that costs are tight and budgets are tight, and that you need to make sure that you are getting that best value. So I think it's definitely worth looking at. You could look at Impact Hub. There's also Social Enterprise UK directories, of other directories of VCFSEs sort of that are out there. I think people have put some on the chat as well. But do work you could have some impact through in terms of what would make the biggest difference and what you're spending your money on. So actually doing that assessment to look at what you are buying and whether you could get more impact through what you're purchasing, whether it's your stationery or the the other bits and pieces that you're buying as a business, as well as who you're working with and who you're partnering with. So I would say definitely, it's definitely worth looking at those options out there. I've often had conversations with VCFSEs that are surprised about the impact that they themselves can achieve through partnering with other organisations.
Great. Okay. Last three questions. I'm conscious of time. Can you bring up the question from Carol Blakely, please? Which I'm going to ask Tiia actually to answer this one. Do businesses understand VCFSE sector, and do you realise there's a big range? So Tiia, how do you think businesses, whether you're SME or big business, how do we help them understand that the VCFSE sector is actually a very broad church?
Yeah, well, of course, I think that throughout the years that we've been doing this matching and stuff, and there is this kind of mutual, like a huge respect, so to speak, and businesses sometimes, kind of consider VCFSEs kind of hard to approach it because they are doing such a good work and stuff, and they don't dare to kind of ask them something, and then the VCFSEs don't dare to ask the businesses because, so I think that we just have to bring people together and start the conversation. And that's why the connectivity is so key, that you can easily ask questions, start building these partnerships and so forth. And that's why what Impact is there for. We just have to communicate. That's the key. And there comes an understanding then how the other organizations operate, because there are very different kind of cultures sometimes in VCFSEs, and then maybe some large corporate. But what I would like to say to companies is that, although we are doing this now a lot for public sector procurement, and the tendering processes are very hectic, and you have to quickly get an answer to social value question and get these partnerships going, please respect the VCFSE's time, and kind of how you communicate and keep the communication going, even if you don't win the tender, because they have seen a lot of trouble trying to make propositions for you and partnership quotes and plans and something like that. So respecting the effort what VCFSEs have to take in this process. And that's my message.
Great. Final thought. I think I'm just going to bring Richard in. I'm sorry, we've run out of time now, so I'm going to bring Richard in just for the final thought. Richard, as the side, and I have to say, 1 million turnover is very. That's amazing what you're doing. I mean, I'm really impressed by the business, the organisation, charity you've built is absolutely fantastic, because doing that, seeking grants, I think is probably a lot harder than any other type of business. So congratulations on that. And separately, I love the conversation, what motivates you. But what do you want from this guidance? What would be most useful to you? Just short answer, and then we'll wrap up.
Conversations with real humans.
Okay, conversation with real humans.
And let me look. I can. We get most of our funding from businesses, and actually we get to talk to people that mean that we can get on the same page real quick about whether or not we've got a solution for them, and that's not possible with public tendering in the same way.
Okay, fine, fantastic, good. Okay, everybody, I'm conscious of time. We're at the top of the hour and I need to stop. So I want to thank you all for listening, and I apologize for not getting to all the great questions. And I've been watching the chatter and so much fantastic chat. But at this stage, I'd like to thank our panelists, Tiia, Sue, Richard, and Katrina, all fantastic. It's been a really good conversation, and I'm sorry we kind of ran out of time. We could have kept going for at least another hour, I suspect. But look, I'll let you carry on with the rest of the conference. I know we've got a short break now, and we're back together at 3:30. So until that time, and perhaps see you tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.